The moment I signed the trust document, I wasn't just securing my stepdaughter's future. I was creating the perfect trap. A trap that would eventually expose the true character of the family who would spend the next 5 years treating me like I was beneath them. Little did they know, every crystal champagne flute they toasted with, every luxury car they drove, and every vacation home they bragged about at their country club, it all belonged to me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in South Boston, luxury was a foreign concept to me. My parents worked multiple jobs just to keep our small apartment and put food on the table. By 16, I was already working after school at a local real estate office, filing paperwork and answering phones. That's where I discovered my fascination with property and investments. While other teenagers dreamed of becoming doctors or celebrities, I dreamed of understanding market trends and property values. My name is Jennifer Wilson, Jenny to those who know me, and by 45, I had built Wilson Properties into one of the most successful real estate investment firms in Massachusetts. But you wouldn't know it by looking at me. I lived in a modest condo downtown, drove a 5-year-old Volvo, and shopped at department stores. Not because I couldn't afford better, but because I learned early on that true wealth isn't about displaying money. It's about building security. I met Robert Thompson when I was 35. He came to my office looking for investment advice after receiving a modest inheritance from his grandfather. Robert was different from the wealthy clients I usually dealt with. He was genuine, hardworking, and kind, a high school history teacher with a passion for education, and a 10-year-old daughter named Emma, who meant everything to him. What started as business meetings over coffee grew into dinners, weekend outings with Emma, and eventually love. When we married a year later, I embraced Emma as my own. Robert never knew the full extent of my wealth. It wasn't something I advertised, and he never asked. He loved me for who I was, not what I owned. When Emma turned 14, Robert was diagnosed with aggressive lymphoma. The next 2 years were a blur of hospital visits, treatments, and trying to maintain normalcy for Emma's sake. Throughout it all, I quietly ensured that every medical bill was paid, every experimental treatment was tried, and that Emma never had to worry about her future education. Robert passed away when Emma was 16, leaving me as her guardian and the only mother figure she had known for years. "I promised your father I would always take care of you," I told Emma the day after the funeral as we sat in the small garden behind our home. "Your education, your dreams, whatever you need, I'm here." What Emma didn't know was that I had already established a substantial trust fund for her, one that would cover not just college, but graduate school if she wanted, a future home, and financial security for years to come. I wanted her to build her own path without the pressure of needing financial success, a luxury I never had. Emma grew into a bright, ambitious young woman who excelled at Boston University. During her senior year, she met William Thompson at a campus fundraiser. William came from what appeared to be an affluent family. His parents, Diane and George Thompson, owned a sprawling house in Brookline and were fixtures in Boston's social scene. George claimed to run a family investment firm, though I could never quite determine what it actually did. When Emma brought William home for dinner the first time, I could see she was smitten. William was handsome, well-educated, and charming, in that polished way that comes from private schools and country clubs. I was happy for Emma, but something about the calculated way he assessed my modest home made me uneasy. "Your stepmother seems nice," William said to Emma as they were leaving. I overheard him from the kitchen window, which was cracked open to release the heat from baking. "Does she work in real estate or something?" "Jenny owns a small property management company," Emma replied. "She's been amazing to me since Dad died." William responded, his tone suggesting he'd placed me firmly in a category in his mind. "My mother is on the board of the Boston Children's Hospital. Perhaps she could find her a position on one of the smaller committees. Always good to network. That was my first glimpse of how the Thompsons viewed the world, as a carefully stratified society where people like me needed a lift up from people like them. When William proposed to Emma after dating for 18 months, I was concerned about the speed but supportive of her happiness. It was during the wedding planning that I truly began to understand the Thompson family dynamic. "We've reserved the Fairmont for the reception," Diane Thompson announced during what was supposed to be a collaborative planning lunch. "The Preston Ballroom. It's where William's cousin had her wedding last spring." "That sounds lovely," said. But Emma mentioned she was hoping for something by the water, maybe the Ocean Institute. Diane's laugh was like glass breaking. "Oh, Jennifer, the Ocean Institute is fine for corporate events, but this is a Thompson wedding. There are expectations." "I think what matters is what Emma wants," I said, looking at my stepdaughter. Emma shifted uncomfortably. "The Fairmont is beautiful, Jenny, and it means a lot to Will's family." "Of course," I conceded, seeing the conflict in her eyes. "It's your day." What I didn't say was that I'd already set aside a substantial amount for Emma's wedding, whatever she wanted. But as the planning progressed, it became clear that what Emma wanted was increasingly shaped by what the Thompsons expected. The wedding was extravagant by any standard. 500 guests, many of whom Emma had never met, a 10-piece orchestra, and floral arrangements that cost more than my first car. Throughout the planning, I was consistently sidelined, my input dismissed with polite but firm redirection. "This shade of blue doesn't quite work with the Thompson family crest on the invitations," Diane would say. Or, "George's business associates expect a certain caliber of champagne." The day before the wedding, I found Emma in tears in the bridal suite of the Fairmont. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting beside her. "Nothing. It's stupid." She wiped at her eyes. Diane changed the seating arrangement. "Your table is now at the back of the room, not with the family." My heart sank, not for myself, but for Emma. "Is that what you want?" She looked conflicted. "No, but Will says it's tradition. Parents of the bride and groom at the front, step-parents. Elsewhere. I don't want to cause problems before I'm even officially part of the family." I squeezed her hand. "All I care about is your happiness. Don't worry about me." At the wedding reception, I sat at my assigned table at the far edge of the ballroom, alongside distant cousins and childhood friends who hadn't made the cut for the important tables. From my vantage point, I watched George Thompson give a speech about family legacy and welcoming Emma into their distinguished lineage. Diane Thompson managed the room like a conductor, ensuring the right people connected, photographs captured, the right groupings and appearances were maintained. I had planned to give Emma a letter her father had written for her wedding day before he died, along with a simple diamond bracelet that had belonged to my grandmother, my only family heirloom. But every time I tried to find a moment alone with her, a Thompson family member would appear with a request or introduction. "Jennifer, there you are," Diane approached as I finally caught Emma between dances. "The photographer needs all family, for the fountain pictures. Emma dear, come along." "Jenny should be in the photos too," Emma said firmly, surprising me with her assertion. Diane's smile never wavered. "Of course, but these are the immediate family portraits. We'll do extended family later." Later never came. As the night progressed, I watched Emma being absorbed into the Thompson universe, her natural warmth and authenticity increasingly overshadowed by practiced smiles and polite networking. After the wedding, Emma and William moved into a stunning brownstone in Beacon Hill, a wedding gift from George and Diane, they explained. What the young couple didn't know was that the brownstone had been purchased through one of my holding companies 3 months earlier, after Diane had casually mentioned to me that it was Emma's dream location, but unfortunately just out of reach currently. I'd arranged for the property to be sold to George Thompson at 30% below market value, with the understanding that it would be a gift to the newlyweds. The Thompsons, of course, took full credit, never knowing that I had quietly absorbed the majority of the cost. This pattern would continue for the next 3 years. The Thompsons lived a life of conspicuous luxury: country club memberships, European vacations, designer wardrobes, while treating me with thinly veiled condescension at family gatherings. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. What they didn't know was that the family investment firm George so proudly touted had been quietly failing for years, and much of their lifestyle was actually funded through a complex series of investments I had arranged after Robert's death, ensuring Emma would be taken care of. I had created a labyrinth of trusts and corporations designed to provide for Emma while maintaining my anonymity as the source. It wasn't that I wanted to deceive her. I simply didn't want her to feel beholden to me or to attract those who would pursue her for her money, rather than her heart. Unfortunately, it seemed William had found her anyway, though he had no idea of the wealth she would one day control. The true nature of the Thompsons' attitude toward me became painfully clear at Emma's 28th birthday dinner. William had arranged a small family gathering at Le Crescent, Boston's most exclusive French restaurant. I arrived exactly on time, dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress. "Jennifer, hello," Diane greeted me at the private dining room entrance. Her eyes swept over my outfit with barely concealed disappointment. "We're business casual this evening." I glanced around at the other guests. The women in designer dresses with statement jewelry, the men in tailored blazers that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I think I missed the memo," I said lightly. "Not to worry." She patted my arm like one might comfort a child. "Perhaps next time check with Charlotte about the dress code. She's so good at explaining these things." Charlotte Hayes, Diane's closest friend, gave me a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I have a pashmina in my car if you're feeling underdressed, Jennifer." "I'm fine, thank you," I replied, making my way to Emma, who brightened when she saw me. "Jenny, I'm so glad you're here." She hugged me tightly. "Will's parents invited some of their friends to join us. I hope you don't mind." The some friends turned out to be 20 of Boston's social elite, most of whom had never met Emma before. As dinner progressed, I observed how William constantly guided Emma's interactions, whispering names and relevant details before introductions, subtly redirecting conversations when Emma's natural enthusiasm became too much. When I presented Emma with my gift, a first edition of her favorite childhood book and a handwritten card, Diane Thompson actually laughed. "How quaint," she said. "William, darling, show Emma what we've gotten her." William produced a small blue box containing diamond earrings that matched the necklace he'd given Emma for Christmas. Jewelry I recognized from ads as being worth well over $50,000. "Thompson women have always worn diamonds," George announced proudly. "Emma deserves to shine as brightly as her future." The not-so-subtle comparison hung in the air. My modest, thoughtful gift versus their ostentatious display of wealth. Emma, caught between gratitude and embarrassment, thanked everyone profusely. Later that evening, as servers cleared dessert plates, the conversation turned to the Thompson family's summer plans. "We've decided to purchase that property in Nantucket," George announced. "The one next to the Hayes'. It's time we had our own place rather than renting." "That's wonderful news," Charlotte Hayes exclaimed. "We'll be neighbors." "Emma has always loved the beach," I commented. "That sounds perfect for summer gatherings." George barely glanced my way. "Yes, well, it's quite an exclusive area. Very private." The implication was clear. I was not included in those future summer plans. As the evening wound down, I overheard William's younger brother Michael speaking to Charlotte Hayes near the coat check. "God, can you believe Emma's stepmother? That dress looks like it came from a department store sale rack." Be nice, Michael, Charlotte chided without conviction. Not everyone understands our world. That's why it's so important that George and Diane have taken Emma under their wing. Imagine if she still dressed and acted like her background. True, Michael laughed. At least she cleans up well, unlike the stepmother. Did you see those shoes? Definitely not Louboutins. I slipped away before they could see me, a strange calm settling over me despite their cruel words. For 3 years, I had watched the Thompsons mold Emma into their image, while treating me as an unfortunate connection best minimized. For 3 years, I had remained silent about the fact that my small property management company was actually a $300 million real estate empire that funded most of their lavish lifestyle through the trusts I had established. Perhaps it was time for some truth. The catalyst came 2 months later when Emma called me in tears. "Jenny, I'm sorry to bother you." Her voice shook, but I didn't know who else to call. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, immediately concerned. "It's Will and his parents. They want me to uninvite you to Thanksgiving. They said they're hosting potential investors for George's business, and they need to project a certain image." My heart sank. "And you're calling to uninvite me?" "No," Emma sounded horrified. "I'm calling because I finally stood up to them, and now everything's falling apart. I told them I wouldn't exclude you from a family holiday, and Will got so angry. He said I don't understand how these social dynamics work, that his father's business is going through a critical phase and they can't afford any." Distractions, I repeated flatly. "His word, not mine," Emma said quickly. "Jenny, I think there's something wrong with their business. Will's been stressed about money lately, checking accounts constantly, arguing with his father in private. But they keep spending like nothing's wrong. They just put a deposit on that Nantucket house, and Diane ordered a new Mercedes yesterday." I closed my eyes, pieces falling into place. The Thompson family business had been struggling for years, staying afloat largely because of my behind-the-scenes financial support I had arranged solely for Emma's benefit. If George was seeking new investors, things must be worse than I thought. "Emma, can you meet me for lunch tomorrow? Just the two of us?" "Yes," she said, sounding relieved. "I'd like that." We met at a quiet cafe in the South End, far from the Thompson family's usual haunts. Emma looked exhausted, the polished exterior the Thompsons had cultivated showing cracks. "I don't know who I am anymore, Jenny," she confessed after we ordered. "Sometimes I catch myself saying things, caring about things that don't actually matter to me. Did you know I spent 3 hours last week arguing with the interior designer about whether the drapes in the guest room should be ivory or ecru?" "Ecru, Jenny. I didn't even know what ecru was 3 years ago." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're still you, Emma. You're still the girl who used to help me plant tomatoes and read novels until 2 a.m. The girl your father was so proud of." Tears filled her eyes. "I miss that person. Will keeps saying I need to grow into my role as his wife, that the Thompson name comes with responsibilities and expectations. But lately, I feel like I'm disappearing. It was time for some truth. Not all of it, but enough. Emma, there's something you should know about your trust fund." Her brow furrowed. "My what?" "After your father died, I established a trust for you. It's quite substantial, and it was designed to activate in stages, some at 25, which has already happened, though the quarterly payments probably seemed like regular investments to you. A larger portion at 30, and the remainder at 35. Emma stared at me. "But we live on Will's income and his family's support." "Do you?" I asked gently. "Check your account statements. Those quarterly deposits aren't standard investment returns." I watched realization dawn on her face. "The trust fund? That's what's been supplementing our income all this time?" I nodded. I wanted you to have security, but also the freedom to find your own path. I never wanted you to feel limited by money, either by having too little or by having so much that it defined you. Does Will know? Not the full extent, no. And there's something else you should know. The brownstone you live in, I helped with that purchase. Emma's eyes widened, but George and Diane gave us the brownstone as a wedding present. They facilitated it, but I arranged for them to purchase it well below market value through one of my companies. They've been taking credit for many things that were actually from me, Emma. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water. Why would they do that? And why wouldn't you tell me? I think they wanted to maintain a certain image of themselves and of their social standing. As for why I didn't tell you, I never wanted to come between you and your new family. I hoped they would genuinely embrace you for the wonderful person you are, not use you as an accessory to their lifestyle. Emma was quiet for a long moment. The Nantucket house they're buying. Is that you too? I shook my head. No. And that concerns me, given what you've said about their financial situation. Emma, how much do you know about the Thompson family business? Not much, she admitted. Will says it's complex, and I wouldn't understand the details. George calls it wealth management for select clients. I see, I said, pieces falling into place. Emma, I think it's time we had a more detailed conversation about your financial situation, and possibly theirs as well. Over the next 2 hours, I explained the full extent of the trust I had established, the quarterly payments she had been receiving, and my suspicions about the Thompson family finances. Emma listened with growing dismay. So, all this time, while they've been treating you like you were beneath them, you've actually been… What? Bankrolling their lifestyle through me? To some extent, I acknowledged. Though that was never my intention. The trust was for you, not them. Emma shook, her head, anger building in her expression, not at me, but at the situation. They've been horrible to you, Jenny. The condescending comments excluding you from family events, treating you like you're some embarrassing connection that needs to be minimized. And all while benefiting from your generosity. What matters to me is how they treat you, I said. Are you happy, Emma? Truly happy? She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I love Will, she finally said. But I don't always like who I become around his family. And I don't like who he becomes around them either. Then perhaps it's time for some changes, I suggested, starting with Thanksgiving. Emma smiled for the first time since we sat down. What do you have in mind? I'm thinking it's time I hosted Thanksgiving this year, at my place. She raised an eyebrow. Your condo. The Thompsons plus staff would barely fit in your living room. Not my condo, I replied with a small smile. My actual home. Emma frowned, confused. I don't understand. There's one more thing I haven't told you, I admitted. The condo is where I work and sometimes stay overnight, but it's not my primary residence. I have a house in Chestnut Hill. I bought it 7 Sabai years ago, but rarely use it because it felt too large for just me. Chestnut Hill? But that's… Yes, one of the addresses the Thompsons would approve of, I said with a wry smile. I've kept my actual financial situation private for many reasons, but perhaps it's time for some transparency. 3 days later, Emma called to tell me the Thompsons had accepted my Thanksgiving invitation, though not without resistance. Diane asked if you were having it catered or if she should bring her chef, Emma reported. I told her you had it handled. She also wanted to know the address so her driver would know where to go. You should have heard her when I said Chestnut Hill. I laughed. I can imagine. They're coming at 5 on Thursday. I didn't tell them anything else. I think some surprises are best experienced in person. When Thanksgiving Day arrived, I made sure everything was perfect. My Chestnut Hill home was a Georgian revival set on 3 acres with manicured gardens and a view of the reservoir. I had purchased it as an investment property initially, but had gradually renovated it into a personal sanctuary I rarely shared with others. At precisely 5 o'clock, the first car arrived, Emma and William. I met them at the door, embracing Emma and accepting William's stiff handshake. "This is not what I expected," William said, looking around at the soaring entry hall with its crystal chandelier and marble floors. "Life is full of surprises," I replied pleasantly. "Emma, would you show Will to the library for drinks? I'll greet your in-laws when they arrive." I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, a luxury SUV pulled into the circular driveway. George and Diane Thompson emerged, followed by William's brother Michael and, surprisingly, Charlotte Hayes. "Jennifer," Diane said as I opened the door, her eyes darting past me to take in the entrance hall. "This is a lovely home. I didn't realize you were house-sitting for someone." "Not house-sitting," I corrected gently. "This is my home. Has been for 7 years now." George frowned. "I don't understand. You live in that downtown condo." "That's my pied-à-terre for work purposes," I explained. "Please, come in. Everyone's gathering in the library for drinks before dinner." I led them through the house, secretly enjoying their poorly concealed shock at the evident wealth on display. The original artwork, the antique furniture, the meticulous design that spoke of both money and taste. In the library, Emma was waiting. With William, who looked as confused as his parents, a uniformed server offered champagne from a silver tray. "Before we begin our evening," I said once everyone had a glass, "I want to thank you all for coming. Family holidays are important, and I'm glad we could all be together." "Yes, well," Diane replied, still visibly processing her surroundings. "It was thoughtful of you to invite us. Though I'm still confused about—" She gestured vaguely at the room. "About how I can afford this?" I supplied. "Or about why I've never mentioned it before?" An uncomfortable silence fell. "Perhaps it's time for some honesty," I continued, calmly. "The small property management company Emma has mentioned to you is actually Wilson Properties. We currently own or manage over $300 million in real estate assets across New England." George nearly choked on his champagne. "Wilson Properties? But that's your—" "Yes," I nodded. "That Wilson Properties." Charlotte Hayes, who had been quietly observing, suddenly seemed to connect the dots. "You're J.A. Wilson? The J.A. Wilson who bought the entire Marshall Building portfolio last year?" "Guilty," I acknowledged. "Though I generally don't broadcast my business dealings or my personal wealth. I prefer to let my work speak for itself." Michael Thompson looked like he'd seen a ghost. I wondered if he was recalling his comments about my department store dress and non-Louboutin shoes. "But why the secrecy?" Diane demanded, her voice higher than usual. "Why let us think you were— well, why let you think I was beneath your social standing?" I finished for her. "I wasn't being secretive, Diane. I was being private. There's a difference. My worth isn't determined by my net worth, and I've never felt the need to prove myself through displays of wealth." I turned to William, whose complexion had gone notably pale. "William, you seem surprised. Did you never research your wife's family connections before marrying her? Or were you too focused on molding her into a proper Thompson to notice her actual background?" Emma took a step forward. "Jenny, it's okay. They get the point." "Do they?" I asked, looking directly at George. "Do you get the point, George? The point that while you've been struggling to maintain appearances, going to increasingly desperate lengths to appear successful, my stepdaughter's trust fund has been quietly ensuring your family could continue living beyond your actual means?" George's face flushed. That's preposterous. The Thompson family doesn't need—" "Dad, stop," William interrupted, looking defeated. "She knows." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "Knows what exactly?" Charlotte Hayes asked, looking between George and William. "That Thompson Wealth Management is essentially insolvent," I stated calmly. "That they've been leveraging existing client assets to pay returns to other clients for years now. That without the regular infusions of cash from Emma's trust, which they've been accessing through joint accounts, they would have been exposed long ago." Diane gasped. "George? Is this true?" George Thompson, the man who had condescended to me for years, suddenly looked every bit his 60 years. "It's not like that. We had some temporary cash flow issues that compounded. We're close to a new round of investors that will stabilize everything." "Those investors won't be coming," I informed him. "I made some calls this morning." "You had no right," George sputtered. "I had every right to protect my stepdaughter and her assets," I countered. "Which brings me to the purpose of gathering everyone here today. It's time for some changes." I walked to the sideboard and retrieved a folder, opening it to reveal several documents. These are the terms going forward. Emma's accounts will be separated from William's completely. The brownstone will be transferred solely into Emma's name. The quarterly payments from the trust will continue, but they will no longer be available to support Thompson Family Enterprises. "You can't do this," William protested. "We're married. Her assets are my assets." "Actually, she can," Emma spoke up, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "And there's a prenuptial agreement you signed, if you recall. One that your parents' lawyer assured you was standard and nothing to worry about. Turns out, it very specifically protects my assets from being used for Thompson family businesses." William stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "You knew about this? All along?" "No." Emma shook her head. "I just found out about most of it this week. But I'm glad Jenny protected me, even when I didn't know I needed protection." I continued. "As for the Nantucket house, you just put a deposit on, George. That transaction will not be proceeding. The seller has already been informed." "This is outrageous," Diane exploded. "You can't just dictate terms to our family. Who do you think you are?" "I'm the woman you've been treating like a servant for years," I replied evenly. "The woman you excluded from family photos, relegated to back tables, forgot to invite to events, and mocked behind her back. I'm also the woman who has been silently funding the lifestyle you've used to justify your sense of superiority. And now, I'm the woman telling you that it stops today." Charlotte Hayes edged toward the door. "I should probably leave. This seems like a family matter." "Please stay, Charlotte," I said. "After all, you've been such an active participant in these dynamics. Remember discussing my department store dress and non-Louboutin shoes with Michael? By the coat check? I think you should hear how the story ends." Michael had the grace to look ashamed. Charlotte froze, mortified at being exposed. "Here's what happens next," I continued. "Emma and William have some serious discussions ahead about their marriage and future. The Thompson family business will need to answer to its investors, legitimately, this time. And all of us will have to decide what kind of relationship we want going forward, if any." I looked around the room at their shocked faces. "Now, dinner is served in the dining room. You're welcome to join us for a civilized meal, where we can begin to have honest conversations about the future. Or you can leave now. The choice is yours." Diane looked to George, who seemed to have aged a decade in the past half hour. William stared at Emma, who stood tall beside me, her expression both sad and resolute. "I think," George said slowly, "that we should stay for dinner, and perhaps begin those honest conversations you mentioned." As we moved toward the dining room, Emma squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for protecting me all these years, even when I didn't know I needed protection." "Always," I promised her. "Your father would be proud of you today." And as we took our seats around the table, the Thompson family subdued and uncertain, Emma finally emerging from their shadow, and me finally acknowledged for who I truly was, I thought about family. Not the one we're born into, not the one we marry into, but the one we build through love, truth, and mutual respect. That was the family worth fighting for. And sometimes, the fight begins with simply standing up and showing people who you really are. The Thanksgiving dinner that followed my revelation was unlike any family gathering I'd ever experienced. The elegant dining room, with its hand-painted ceiling and antique crystal chandelier, felt like a stage set for the final act of a long-running play. The Thompson family, George, Diane, William, and Michael, sat stiffly in their chairs, their usual confidence replaced by a palpable unease. Charlotte Hayes, Diane's social lieutenant, kept glancing toward the exit as if calculating her escape route. I had instructed my chef to prepare a traditional Thanksgiving feast, though the presentation was anything but traditional. Each course arrived with immaculate timing, served on the Limoges china I rarely used. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of the Thompsons flaunting their supposed superiority, I was finally revealing the wealth and refinement I'd kept private for so long. "The turkey is exceptionally moist," Charlotte ventured, clearly attempting to break the uncomfortable silence that had fallen after we took our seats. "Julia has been my chef for 5 years," I replied pleasantly. "She trained in Paris before, working at several Michelin-starred restaurants in New York." "You have a private chef?" Michael blurted, then flushed when everyone turned to look at him. "Julia comes in 3 times a week to prepare meals I can heat later," I explained. "I'm often too busy with property acquisitions to cook properly. She also handles special occasions like this one." "How convenient," Diane managed, her voice strained. She took a too large sip of wine, a 2009 Bordeaux that George, in better days, would have recognized as a $500 bottle. Emma, seated beside me, maintained a quiet dignity throughout the stilted small talk. She answered questions directly but volunteered nothing, her posture straight but not rigid. I felt a surge of pride watching her navigate this difficult situation, with such composure. The Emma of 3 years ago might have rushed to smooth over tensions, to accommodate everyone else's feelings at the expense of her own. This Emma was different. William kept glancing at his wife, confusion and calculation warring in his expression. I wondered if he was reassessing their entire relationship in light of what he'd learned about our financial situation, or merely recalibrating his approach now that the power dynamic had shifted. "Jenny mentioned you have some business concerns to address," Emma said to George during a lull in the conversation, her voice steady. "Perhaps we should discuss those directly." Instead of pretending this is a normal family dinner, George's fork froze halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, buying time. "Business concerns is an overstatement. We've had some. Cash flow complications that are being resolved." "You mean the Ponzi scheme you've been running?" I asked mildly, serving myself another portion of cranberry sauce. "It is not a Ponzi scheme," George snapped, his composed facade cracking. "Thompson Wealth Management has a 50-year history of excellence. We've navigated difficult markets before. By using new client investments to pay existing clients? By leveraging Emma's trust fund without her knowledge?" I countered. "That's textbook fraud, George." Diane made a small, distressed sound. "George, you promised me everything was under control." "It is," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "We've weathered downturns before. Not like this," William said quietly, surprising everyone. "Dad, we're beyond creative accounting at this point. The Cooper account withdrawal requests alone would sink us if they came through tomorrow." I watched the dynamic shift as William broke ranks with his father. George seemed to deflate, the illusion of the powerful patriarch dissolving before our eyes. "How bad is it really?" Emma asked her husband directly. William glanced at his father, who gave a barely perceptible nod of defeat. We're about 8 million short of what we need to cover current obligations, William admitted. The Nantucket property was supposed to be collateral for a bridge loan to keep things afloat until we secured new investors. 8 million, Emma repeated, letting the number hang in the air. And how much of my trust fund have you already used? William had the grace to look ashamed. About 2 million over the past 3 years. We were going to pay it back once we stabilized. With what? I asked. Magic beans? More trusting clients? Emma's future distributions? You've known about this all along, haven't you? Diane suddenly turned on William. You married Emma knowing about her trust fund. That's why you pushed the relationship so quickly. William flushed. That's not true. I love Emma. The financial aspect was a fortunate coincidence. Emma set down her knife and fork with deliberate care. A coincidence you leveraged immediately after our wedding. Was any of it real, Will? Or was I just a convenient solution to your family's financial problems? Of course it was real, he protested, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. Emma, you have to believe me. Yes, I knew about your trust fund, but that's not why I married you. How did you know? I interjected. The trust was carefully structured for privacy. Even Emma didn't know the full extent of it until recently. William hesitated. Dad? Had a contact at Boston Trust who hinted at Emma's financial situation. Not specifics, just that she was the beneficiary of a substantial trust managed by the bank. So you investigated my stepdaughter's finances before proposing, I clarified. That's quite the prenuptial due diligence. It wasn't like that, William insisted. The information came up in casual conversation. At the exact time your family business was beginning to struggle, Emma noted, her voice cool. What a remarkable coincidence indeed. Charlotte, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly stood. I should really be going. This is clearly a private family matter. Sit down, Charlotte, Diane commanded, her society manners finally abandoned. You've been part of every scheme and social maneuver the Thompson family has executed for 15 years. You don't get to disappear now that the tide has turned. Charlotte sank back into her chair, looking trapped. Besides, I added pleasantly, we haven't even had dessert yet. Julia has prepared a pumpkin creme brulee that I think you'll find remarkable. As if on cue, the dining room door opened and Julia appeared with her assistant, clearing dinner plates and preparing for the dessert course. The well-timed interruption provided a brief respite from the mounting tensions, allowing everyone a moment to collect themselves. Once we were alone again, George cleared his throat. Jennifer, I assume you've arranged this confrontation with some solution in mind. What exactly do you want from us? I appreciated his directness, if not his assumption that my revelation was a negotiating tactic rather than a long overdue truth. I want several things, George. First, complete financial transparency regarding how Emma's money has been used. Second, a detailed plan for how Thompson Wealth Management intends to resolve its obligations without further exploitation of my stepdaughter. And third, a fundamental reassessment of how your family treats people you perceive as beneath your social standing. That last one seems rather personal rather than financial, Michael observed, speaking up for the first time since his earlier embarrassment. It is, I agreed, but I've found that how people handle wealth often reveals their true character. The Thompson family has consistently demonstrated that you believe money and social status determine a person's worth. That mindset has harmed Emma, alienated potential allies like myself, and ultimately undermined your business ethics. So yes, I consider it relevant to any resolution we might reach. You speak as if you hold all the cards, George said, a hint of his former confidence returning. But exposure of Thompson Wealth Management's difficulties would harm Emma as well. William is her husband. Any scandal would affect them both. Are you threatening my stepdaughter as a negotiating tactic? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. Of course not, William jumped in. Dad's just pointing out that we're all connected now. Family. Family, Emma repeated, the word hanging between us like a question. Is that what we are, Will? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like I've been treated more like an ATM with social connections than a family member. That's not fair, Diane protested. We've welcomed you into our home, introduced you to our circle, guided you in developing the appropriate social presence. You've remade me in your image, Emma corrected. Every opinion, preference, or background that didn't align with Thompson's standards was systematically eliminated. Even my relationship with Jenny, the woman who raised me after my father died, was something to be managed and minimized. We were trying to help you advance socially, Diane insisted. Jennifer's background wasn't conducive to the connections we were cultivating for you and William. My background? I raised an eyebrow. You mean my $300 million real estate empire? My privately owned company that outperforms most of the firms in your social circle? Or perhaps you mean my habit of not flaunting wealth I've legitimately earned? Diane flushed. You deliberately misled us about your financial situation. I was private, not deceptive, I corrected. Unlike the Thompson family, who have been actively fraudulent, both socially and financially. George pushed his untouched dessert away. What happens now, Jennifer? Will you report us to the SEC? Force a liquidation of our assets? What's your endgame here? I considered the defeated man before me. George Thompson had spent decades cultivating an image of success and social prominence, using that image to intimidate, exclude, and manipulate others. Now exposed and vulnerable, he was finally seeing me clearly, not as the embarrassing stepmother to be marginalized, but as someone with the power to destroy everything he had built. My only concern is Emma's well-being, I said finally. I have no interest in causing unnecessary damage to your family or your firm's clients, but I will not allow this situation to continue. I reached into the folder I had brought to the table and removed several documents. These papers outline a proposed resolution. Wilson Properties will provide a loan of $10 million to Thompson Wealth Management, secured by your personal assets, including this Nantucket property you're so eager to acquire. The loan will allow you to meet your current obligations and wind down operations in an orderly fashion. Wind down operations? George looked stricken. You're asking us to close the family business? I'm offering you a way to meet your fiduciary obligations without facing criminal charges, I clarified. Thompson Wealth Management can reorganize, rebrand, or close entirely. That's your decision. But the days of operating as you have been are over. And what do you get out of this arrangement? William asked, his business acumen finally engaging with the reality of the situation. I get the assurance that my stepdaughter's financial interests are protected. I get your acknowledgement of how inappropriately you've behaved toward both Emma and myself. And I get your pledge that regardless of what happens between Emma and William going forward, the Thompson family will treat her with the respect she deserves. You're talking as if our marriage is in question, William said, turning to Emma with alarm. Sweetheart, I know tonight has been shocking, but we can work through this. Emma met his gaze steadily. Can we, Will? You married me knowing about my trust fund, but keeping me in the dark about your family's financial troubles. You've participated in using my money without my knowledge or consent. You've consistently prioritized your parents' expectations over my feelings. Tell me, what exactly are we working through? The deception? The financial exploitation? Or the fact that I don't even recognize myself when I look in the mirror anymore? A heavy silence fell over the table. William seemed genuinely stunned by Emma's words, as if he were finally hearing her authentic voice for the first time. I still love you, he said quietly. I believe you think you do, Emma replied. But I'm not sure you even know who I really am. I'm not sure I do either anymore. Charlotte, who had been watching this exchange with the avid attention of someone witnessing a social car crash, cleared her throat. Perhaps I really should leave. This seems like... Finish your dessert, Charlotte, Diane snapped. You've been part of every humiliation our family has inflicted on Jennifer and Emma. The least you can do is witness the consequences. I was surprised by Diane's sudden turn against her social ally, but I recognized it for what it was, a calculated redistribution of blame. If Charlotte had been part of the Thompson family's poor treatment of Emma and me, then Diane herself was somewhat less culpable. It was a sophisticated deflection technique, one that indicated Diane might be more perceptive than I had given her credit for. The documents also stipulate that Emma's trust fund will be restructured, I continued, bringing the focus back to the business at hand. All assets will be moved to a new trustee, with no access whatsoever for William or any member of the Thompson family without Emma's explicit written consent, verified by an independent third party. You're financially separating us, William realized. I'm protecting my stepdaughter, I corrected. Something I should have done more definitively from the beginning. And if we refuse your terms? George asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then tomorrow morning I'll contact the SEC, the Massachusetts Securities Division, and every client of Thompson Wealth Management whose contact information I can obtain. I'll provide them with documentation of your financial irregularities, including the unauthorized use of Emma's trust assets. I'll also notify the board of the Boston Children's Hospital about Diane's creative fundraising reports, and I'll ensure that every social connection you've cultivated over the past 20 years understands exactly how the Thompson family fortune has been maintained. The color drained from George's face. How do you know about Diane's fundraising reports? I make it my business to know about people who mistreat my family, I replied simply. I've had a financial investigator documenting your activities for the past year. Initially, it was just to protect Emma, but the more we uncovered, the more concerned I became. You've been investigating us? Diane looked horrified. While sitting at our dinner table, accepting our invitations? The few invitations you deigned to extend, I reminded her. And yes, I've been watching you operate while you believed. I was too unsophisticated to recognize what was happening. It's amazing what people reveal when they think you pose no threat. Michael, who had remained largely silent throughout dinner, suddenly laughed. A short, sharp sound with no humor in it. This is unbelievable. The woman we've been mocking behind her back for years turns out to be holding all the power. It's like a bad movie plot. Life often lacks the subtlety of good fiction, I observed. But the Thompson family has certainly provided enough dramatic irony to fuel a miniseries. Jenny, Emma said quietly, I think I'd like to leave now. This has been overwhelming. I immediately stood. Of course. Would you like to stay here tonight? The guest rooms are always ready. I'd like that, she nodded, then turned to William. I think we need some time apart to process everything. I'll have Casey bring some of my things over tomorrow. William looked as if he wanted to protest but thought better of it. Whatever you need, he said instead. We can talk when you're ready. I'd like copies of those documents to review with our attorney, George interjected, gesturing to the papers I'd presented. They're yours to keep, I confirmed. You have 48 hours to sign or to present a counterproposal that addresses all of my concerns. After that, my offer is withdrawn, and we proceed with full disclosure to all relevant parties. 48 hours isn't enough time to... It's 39 hours more than you deserve, I cut him off. I suggest you use them wisely. As the dinner party broke up, the Thompson family gathered their dignity as best they could. Diane made a point of thanking Julia for the meal, a reflexive social nicety that seemed almost comical under the circumstances. Charlotte slipped away with minimal farewells, no doubt already composing the version of events she would share with her social circle. William lingered, clearly hoping for a moment alone with Emma, but she avoided his gaze. I'll call you tomorrow, she promised vaguely as George all but dragged his son toward the door. Once they were gone, Emma collapsed onto one of the living room sofas, suddenly looking exhausted. I can't believe that just happened, she murmured. Any of it. I sat beside her, giving her space but staying close. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I've been watching them take advantage of you for years, and when you called me about Thanksgiving, something just broke loose. Don't apologize. Emma shook her head. You've been protecting me all along, haven't you? Not just financially, but in every way you could without taking away my independence. I promised your father I would always look out for you, I reminded her. But I also knew you needed to make your own choices, even if some of them were mistakes. Emma was quiet for a moment, then asked in a small voice, Was marrying William a mistake? I considered my answer carefully. I think you married a man who showed you one version of himself, the version he thought you wanted to see. Whether the real William is someone you want to build a life with is something only you can decide. I don't even know who the real William is, Emma sighed. Or who the real Emma is anymore, for that matter. I've spent 3 years trying to be the perfect Thompson wife. I'm not sure what's left of me underneath all that. Everything important, I assured her. Your compassion, your intelligence, your creativity. Those things don't disappear just because they've been temporarily overshadowed. Emma leaned her head against my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of her teenage years that my heart constricted. What happens now? She asked. Now you rest, I told her. Tomorrow, we can talk about next steps, legal considerations, and everything else. But tonight, just breathe. Will they sign the agreement? George will, I predicted. He's pragmatic, enough to recognize when he's cornered. He'll spin it as a strategic alliance rather than a bailout, and he'll immediately begin looking for ways to exploit the situation to his advantage. But he'll sign. And William? That depends on what matters most to him, I said honestly. His marriage or his family legacy. Emma nodded, then stood up with sudden determination. I want to see it, she announced. See what? My childhood bedroom. You kept it, didn't you? At your condo. I smiled. Actually, it's here. When I bought this house, I recreated your room exactly as it was in our old place. I thought someday you might need it again, even if just for visits. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You created a space for me in your life, even when I wasn't present to fill it. You're always present in my life, Emma, I told her softly. Whether you're physically here or not. I led her upstairs to the bedroom that had been waiting for her all these years. It was exactly as she remembered from her high school days. The same lavender walls, the bookshelves filled with her favorite novels, even the silly stuffed penguin she'd won at a carnival when she was 14. The room was meticulously clean, regularly dusted and aired, as if I had been expecting her all along. Emma walked slowly around the room, touching objects, reacquainting herself with this preserved piece of her past. The Thompsons would think this is ridiculous, she remarked, maintaining a teenager's bedroom for a grown woman. The Thompsons have very rigid ideas about what matters, I replied. Fortunately, we don't have to subscribe to them. Emma picked up the penguin, hugging it to her chest. I remember when I won this. Dad was so excited. You'd think I'd won an Olympic medal instead of a carnival prize. Your father found joy in the smallest moments, I recalled fondly. It was one of the things I loved most about him. I've forgotten how to do that, Emma admitted. Find joy in small things. Everything with the Thompsons is about appearances, impressions, calculating the social value of every interaction. It's exhausting. Then don't do it anymore, I suggested simply. Emma looked at me, a tentative smile forming. Just like that? Just like that, I confirmed. You're an adult with financial security and people who love you for exactly who you are. You get to choose how you live your life, what matters to you, and who you want to spend your time with. Even if that means disappointing William, possibly ending my marriage? Even then, I nodded. Though that's not a decision you need to make tonight. Right now, you just need to rest and remember who Emma really is." Emma set the penguin back on the bed and moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit garden below. I used to have such clear ideas about what I wanted. College, career, making a difference somehow. When did I start measuring my worth by whether I was using the correct fork or wearing the right designer? "When you married into a family that values those things above authenticity," I said, "but that doesn't mean you can't reclaim your own values." Emma turned back to me, her expression resolute. "Tomorrow, I want to review all the financial documents. I want to understand exactly what's been happening with my trust, with the Thompson business, with everything. No more operating in the dark." "Absolutely," I agreed. "I'll have my financial team prepare a complete briefing. I can also arrange for an independent advisor if you'd prefer. Someone with no connection to me or to the Thompsons." "I trust you," Emma said simply. "I always have. I just lost sight of that for a while." As I left Emma to settle in for the night, I reflected on the evening's revelations. The confrontation with the Thompson family had been necessary but draining. Their shock at discovering my true financial status had been almost comical, but their dismay at being held accountable for their behavior was entirely genuine. For years, they had dismissed me as irrelevant, a middle-class stepmother with no social standing, no significant resources, and therefore no power in their carefully calibrated world. They had systematically marginalized me while simultaneously exploiting the financial security I had provided for Emma. Now, finally, the truth was exposed. Not just about my wealth, but about their precarious financial situation, their manipulation of Emma, and the hollow core of their supposed social superiority. The reckoning had begun, but it was far from complete. As I prepared for bed that night, my phone chimed with a text message from William. "We need to talk. Privately. It's important." I considered ignoring it, but something in the simple directness of the message gave me pause. William was many things: privileged, entitled, morally flexible when it suited his family's interests. But he wasn't stupid. If he was reaching out separately from his parents, he might have something significant to say. I texted back, "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office downtown." Then I turned off my phone, not interested in further negotiations tonight. Whatever William wanted to discuss could wait until morning. Tonight was about Emma rediscovering herself, and about me finally stepping fully into the light after years of allowing the Thompsons to minimize my presence in my stepdaughter's life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult conversations, and perhaps painful decisions for Emma about her marriage. But tonight, for the first time in years, both Emma and I were free from pretense. We were simply ourselves. No social masks, no calculated deference, no hidden truths. And that, I reflected as I drifted toward sleep, was worth more than all the Thompson family's hollow prestige. William nodded, looking genuinely pained. Of course I did. When I first met Emma, she was vibrant, opinionated, passionate about her ideas. She had this infectious enthusiasm that drew me to her. But over time, I watched my mother chip away at those qualities, training her to be more appropriate, more restrained. And I let it happen because that's how I was raised, believing that fitting in with certain circles was the ultimate achievement. I leaned back in my chair, considering his words. "So you recognized what was happening but did nothing to stop it?" "I encouraged it," he admitted, the self-recrimination evident in his voice. "I told Emma that my mother's guidance would help her navigate our social world. I treated her authentic self as something that needed refinement rather than celebration. It's one of my deepest regrets." His candor was unexpected. I had been prepared for denials, for blame shifting, for the kind of calculated charm the Thompsons typically deployed in difficult situations. This raw honesty seemed out of character for the William I thought I knew. "What exactly are you hoping to achieve with this conversation?" I asked directly. "Forgiveness? Assistance with your legal situation? Access to Emma?" "I don't expect forgiveness," William replied. "Not yet. What I'm hoping for is a chance to prove that I can be better than my upbringing, that I can be the husband Emma deserves, not the one my parents groomed me to be." He paused. "And yes, I'm hoping you might help me reach her. She respects you, trusts you. If you're willing to tell her that you believe I'm sincere, she might at least hear me out." "That's quite a request," I observed. "You're asking me to vouch for you after years of watching you participate in your family's mistreatment of both Emma and myself." "I know it's a lot to ask," he acknowledged, "but I also know that you care more about Emma's happiness than about holding grudges. If there's any chance that our marriage can be salvaged, that we can build something honest and healthy, I think you'd want that for her." He was right about one thing. Emma's well-being was my priority. But that didn't mean I was ready to trust William's apparent transformation. "Here's what I'm willing to do," I said after a moment's consideration. "I'll tell Emma that we've spoken and that you've expressed regret about your actions. I'll share my impressions of our conversation honestly, including my skepticism. But I won't advocate for you. Any reconciliation between you and Emma needs to be her choice, based on her assessment of your sincerity." "That's fair," William agreed, relief evident in his expression. "More than fair, actually." "Additionally," I continued, "if you're serious about making a clean break from your family's business practices, I want to see concrete actions, not just words. Start by providing a complete accounting of how Emma's trust fund money was used. Every transfer, every investment, every expense it covered." "I've already begun compiling that information," he said, reaching for his briefcase. "I brought a preliminary report with me." He removed a thick folder and placed it on my desk. "It's not complete yet. Some of the transactions were hidden, even from me, but it's everything I've been able to reconstruct so far." I glanced at the folder but didn't open it. "I'll have my financial team review this. If they find any inconsistencies or omissions, it will significantly damage your credibility with both me and Emma." "I understand," William nodded. "Complete transparency is the only way forward." "What about your parents?" I asked. "How have they reacted to your decision to break from the family business?" William's expression darkened. "They don't know yet. After we left your house last night, there was a heated discussion. My father is convinced he can negotiate more favorable terms with you. My mother is focused on damage control within their social circle. Neither of them seems to grasp the severity of the situation." "And Michael?" "Michael is Michael," William said with a hint of the old family exasperation. "He's already trying to calculate how to maintain his lifestyle with minimal personal consequences. He suggested that perhaps I should make the most of my marriage, given Emma's financial situation." "Charming," I remarked dryly. "I nearly punched him," William admitted. "It was like suddenly seeing my family through clear glass after years of viewing them through a distorted lens. Their values, their priorities, everything I was raised to believe was important, it all seemed so hollow." I studied him carefully. Either William was experiencing a genuine moral awakening, or he was executing an extremely sophisticated manipulation. After years in business, I had developed a fairly reliable sense for when someone was being authentic versus when they were performing. William's demeanor, his body language, the emotional undertones in his voice, all suggested genuine distress and remorse. But the stakes were too high to rely solely on intuition. "I have a proposal," I said finally. "A test of your sincerity, if you will." "I'm listening," he replied, sitting up straighter. "Call your parents. Now, from this office." Tell them about your decision to separate yourself from the family business and to cooperate with any investigation. Tell them that you're committed to rebuilding your marriage to Emma on honest terms, even if that means opposing their wishes. Do all of this while on speakerphone, with me present." William paled slightly but nodded. "All right, I'll do it." "To be clear," I added, "I'm not asking you to be cruel or confrontational. This isn't about creating family drama for my entertainment, but I need to see that you're willing to take this stand publicly, not just in private conversations where promises are easier to make." William removed his phone from his pocket, staring at it for a moment before looking back up at me. "My father will likely disown me for this." "Possibly," I agreed. "Is that enough to change your mind?" He took a deep breath. "No. I've spent my entire life trying to earn my father's approval. Look where that's gotten me. Complicit in financial fraud and on the verge of losing the one person who loved me for myself rather than for the Thompson name." He dialed the number and placed the phone on my desk, activating the speaker function. The phone rang 3 times before George Thompson's voice filled the room, sounding tense and irritable. "William, finally. Where have you been? Your mother and I have been trying to reach you all morning. We need to finalize our counterproposal to Jennifer's terms before—" "Dad, I need to tell you something," William interrupted, his voice steady despite the visible tension in his shoulders. "I'm withdrawing completely from Thompson Wealth Management. Effective immediately." A moment of stunned silence followed before George found his voice. "What the hell are you talking about? This is hardly the time for dramatic gestures. We need to present a united front in these negotiations." "This isn't a negotiating tactic," William clarified. "I've been consulting with my own attorney about cooperating fully with regulators regarding the firm's practices over the past 5 years." "You've what?" George's voice rose sharply. "Have you lost your mind? Speaking to outside attorneys? About internal matters. Do you have any idea of the damage you could cause?" "I'm fully aware of the potential consequences," William replied. "Both for the firm and for myself personally. I've decided I need to take responsibility for my part in what's happened." "Is Jennifer Wilson behind this?" George demanded. "Has she threatened you? Manipulated you? Because we can fight back." "William, the Thompson family has weathered challenges before." "This has nothing to do with Jenny," William cut in. "This is my decision. I should have made it years ago when I first realized what was happening with client funds." "Where are you right now?" George asked, his tone suddenly suspicious. William glanced at me before answering. "I'm at Wilson Properties, meeting with Jenny to discuss how to move forward." "Jesus Christ," George exploded. "You're with her while making these declarations? Is she recording this conversation? Are you being coerced?" "No one is recording anything," William stated calmly. "And the only coercion I've experienced over the past decade has been from you and Mother, pressuring me to participate in increasingly unethical business practices while maintaining the fiction of Thompson family superiority." "You ungrateful," George began, then suddenly shifted tactics, his voice becoming calculatedly reasonable. "William, son, I understand you're upset after last night's revelations. It was a shock for all of us. But making hasty decisions in the heat of emotion is never wise. Come home. Let's discuss this as a family." "I'm not coming home," William replied. "I'm going to find Emma and see if there's any chance she can forgive me for how I've treated her, for how we've all treated her." "Emma is fine," George dismissed. "A bit dramatic, perhaps, but she'll come around once she understands the complexities of the situation. Your mother is already making calls, smoothing things over with our social circle. By next week, this will all be—" "Dad, stop," William interrupted, frustration evident in his voice. "You still don't get it. The facades, the social maneuvering, the constant concern about appearances, none of it matters. It's all just smoke. What matters is that I've betrayed my wife's trust. I've participated in defrauding clients who trusted our family with their financial security. I've allowed Emma to be reshaped into someone she was never meant to be. And I've stood by while you and Mother treated Jenny with contempt, despite everything she's done for Emma. A long silence followed this outburst. When George finally spoke again, his voice had hardened into something cold and unfamiliar. See? So you've made your choice. The stepmother over your own family. This isn't about choosing sides, William protested. It's about finally being honest. Honesty, George scoffed. A convenient principle to discover when the ship is sinking. Let me be equally honest with you, William. If you proceed with this course of action, cooperating with regulators, separating yourself from the family business, you are no longer my son. Your trust fund, your position in the firm, your standing in this family, all of it will be revoked. William closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the blow. I understand. Do you? George challenged. Do you understand what it means to be cut off from everything you've ever known? To become a pariah in the circles you've been part of since birth? To wake up one morning and discover you have no identity beyond the family name you've rejected? I'm beginning to, William replied quietly. And I think it might be the most important education I've ever received. This conversation is over, George declared flatly. Return your keys to the office and the family home by the end of day. Your personal belongings will be packed and delivered to a location of your choosing. Do not attempt to contact your mother or Michael. As far as the Thompson family is concerned, you no longer exist. The line went dead. William stared at the silent phone for a long moment before looking up to meet my gaze. Well, he said finally, with a ghost of a smile, that went about as expected. Are you all right? I asked, genuinely concerned despite my lingering skepticism. No, he admitted frankly. I'm terrified. I've never been without the Thompson safety net before. I've never had to face consequences for my actions. I've never had to figure out who I am separate from my family's expectations. He paused. But I'm also relieved? It's strange. There's this weight that's been lifted, the constant pressure to be the perfect Thompson son, to maintain the facade at all costs. I nodded, acknowledging his candor. That was a significant step, William, standing up to your father that way. It felt like the least I could do, he said. After years of compliance and cowardice, what will you do now? He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly younger and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. Honestly, I have no idea. Find somewhere to stay, I guess. Continue cooperating with the financial investigation. Hope that Emma might eventually be willing to talk to me. I made a decision in that moment, not based on complete trust, which would take far longer to rebuild, but on the recognition of genuine effort. You can stay in the guest house at my Chestnut Hill property, I offered. It's separate from the main house, so Emma won't feel pressured by your presence, but close enough that communication will be possible if and when she's ready. William looked stunned. You'd do that? After everything? I'm not doing it for you, I clarified. I'm doing it for Emma. She needs time and space to process everything that's happened, but she also deserves the opportunity to make informed decisions about her marriage. Having you nearby but not intrusive gives her that option. Thank you, he said simply. I don't deserve your kindness. No, you don't, I agreed. Not yet. But people can change, William. I've seen it happen. Whether you're genuinely transforming or simply executing an elaborate scheme to salvage your position will become evident over time. That's fair, he nodded. More than fair. I glanced at my watch. I need to get back to Emma. I promised her I'd return by noon. Of course, William stood. What should I tell her? Or should I wait for her to contact me? I'll let her know about our conversation. And your call with your father, I told him. I'll share my impressions honestly. including both my skepticism and the signs of sincerity I've observed. After that, it's her decision whether and when to communicate with you. I understand, he said, then hesitated. Jenny, thank you. Not just for today, but for everything you've done for Emma all these years. I see now what I was too blind or too conditioned to recognize before. You're a remarkable woman who has always put Emma's well-being first, even when it meant staying in the background while people like my parents took credit and claimed prominence. The acknowledgement was unexpected, and I found myself momentarily at a loss for words. After years of subtle and not-so-subtle dismissal from the Thompson family, this simple recognition of my role in Emma's life felt surprisingly meaningful. Try not to sound so shocked that the middle-class stepmother turned out to be a competent human being, I replied dryly, recovering my composure. William had the grace to look embarrassed. I deserve that, and probably much worse. The guest house key will be at the security gate, I told him, standing to indicate our meeting was concluded. The code to the property is 5294. There's a separate alarm system for the guest house that the security guard will explain. Thank you, William said again. I promise I won't make you regret this. Don't make promises you can't guarantee, I advised him. Just do the next right thing and then the next. That's how redemption works, one decision at a time. After William left, I sat at my desk for several minutes, processing what had just occurred. The conversation had gone in a direction I hadn't anticipated. I had expected denial, justification, perhaps attempts at manipulation, the classic Thompson playbook. Instead, William had displayed what appeared to be genuine remorse and a willingness to face serious consequences for his actions. People could change. I believed that. But I had also seen enough in my business career to know that desperation could produce remarkably convincing performances. Was William's apparent transformation genuine, or simply a calculated adaptation to his suddenly precarious circumstances? Time would tell. And in the meantime, my priority remained Emma's well-being and protecting her financial interests. I called my head of security to arrange access for William to the guest house, then gathered my things and headed back to Chestnut Hill. The morning's events had given me much to consider, but I was determined to present Emma with a balanced assessment of my conversation with William, allowing her to make her own decisions about how to proceed. When I arrived home, I found Emma in the garden room, a bright conservatory filled with plants that I maintained as a peaceful retreat from the pressures of business. She was curled on one of the wicker sofas, reading a dog-eared paperback that I recognized as a favorite from her college days. "How was your meeting?" she asked, setting the book aside as I joined her. "Enlightening," I replied, settling into the chair opposite her. William has decided to make a complete break from Thompson Wealth Management. He's consulted with his own attorney about cooperating with regulators regarding the firm's practices. Emma's eyes widened. He's turning against his family? I can't imagine George taking that well. He didn't, I confirmed. William called him from my office to inform him of his decision. George effectively disowned him on the spot, cut off his trust fund, his position in the firm, everything. "You witnessed this?" Emma asked, clearly trying to process this development. "The call was on speakerphone at my request," I explained. I wanted to see if William was truly willing to take this stand publicly, not just make private assurances. And was he? Willing, I mean. Yes, I nodded. He stood his ground even when George threatened him with complete excommunication from the family. He also brought documentation regarding how your trust fund money was used. I gestured to the folder I'd placed on the coffee table between us. I haven't reviewed it yet, but he claims it's a comprehensive accounting of all transfers and investments. Emma stared at the folder, but made no move to touch it. What do you think? Is this genuine remorse? Or is he just adapting to the new reality now that his family's in trouble? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I admitted. There were elements of our conversation that seemed genuinely emotional, moments of self-awareness that would be difficult to fake. But the Thompsons are skilled social performers, and William has been trained in impression management since childhood. So we wait and see, Emma concluded. We observe his actions over time, I agreed. Words are easy. Consistent behavior is more revealing. Emma was quiet for a moment, absently tracing the pattern on the sofa cushion. Where will he go, now that George has cut him off? I've offered him the guest house here, I told her. Before you object, I added quickly, seeing her startled expression. It's entirely separate from the main house. You won't have to interact with him unless you choose to. I thought having him nearby but not intrusive would give you the option of communication on your terms, if and when you're ready. That's thoughtful, Emma said slowly, though I'm surprised you'd extend that kindness to him after everything. It's not entirely altruistic, I admitted. Having William close by means we can monitor his actions more easily. It also provides leverage in terms of his cooperation with the financial investigation. And frankly, I'm curious to see if his apparent transformation holds up under the pressure of actual consequences. Ever the strategist, Emma observed with a small smile. In business and in life, I agreed. But ultimately, this is your decision, Emma. If you're uncomfortable having William on the property, even at a distance, I'll rescind the offer immediately. Emma considered this, her expression thoughtful. No, she decided finally. Let him stay. You're right that it might be useful to have the option of controlled communication. And I do need to understand exactly what happened with our finances. She gestured to the folder, though I'm not ready to go through that just yet. Whenever you're ready, I assured her. There's no rush. Did William say anything else? Emma asked. About us, I mean. About our marriage. I considered how to phrase my response, wanting to be honest without unduly influencing her perspective. He expressed regret about allowing his parents to reshape you into someone you weren't meant to be. He said he recognized the changes in you over time, but encouraged them because that's how he was raised, believing that conforming to certain social expectations was the ultimate achievement. Emma's eyes filled with tears. The worst part is that I let it happen. I wanted so badly to fit in, to be accepted by his family, that I willingly erased parts of myself. I thought I was maturing, becoming more sophisticated. Now I realize I was just disappearing. I moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her hand. You haven't disappeared, Emma. You're still there beneath the social conditioning. I can see glimpses of you emerging already, in your laugh. This morning, in your choice of reading material, in your willingness to ask difficult questions instead of accepting convenient answers. She leaned against my shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of her teenage years that it made my heart ache. I'm angry, Jenny, not just at the Thompsons, but at myself for being so malleable, for forgetting what really matters. That anger is healthy, I told her. It's part of reclaiming yourself. Just don't let it consume you. What do I do now? She asked softly. About William, about my marriage, about everything? You take time, I advised. Time to reconnect with yourself, to rediscover what you value and what you want from life. There's no rush to make permanent decisions about your marriage or anything else. You have financial security, a safe place to stay, and people who care about your well-being. The rest can unfold gradually. Emma nodded against my shoulder. I've been thinking about my career. Before I met William, I was planning to work in arts education. I had that internship at the Children's Museum lined up. Then suddenly, I was a Thompson wife, and my job became managing our social calendar and serving on the right committees. It's not too late to pursue what matters to you, I reminded her. You're only 28. You have decades ahead to build a career that feels meaningful. The Children's Museum probably isn't holding my position 3 years later, Emma said with a watery laugh. Probably not, I agreed. But there are countless opportunities out there. And in the meantime, you can volunteer, take classes, explore different paths until you find what resonates. That sounds freeing, Emma admitted. Terrifying, but freeing. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both processing the morning's developments. Finally, Emma straightened, wiping away the last traces of tears. I think I'd like to go shopping, she announced. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by this seemingly frivolous suggestion after our intense conversation. Shopping? Yes, she nodded decisively. I need some new clothes, ones that I actually like, not ones that Diane Thompson would approve of. I've spent 3 years dressing for someone else's approval. I want to remember what it feels like to choose something simply because it brings me joy. I smiled, recognizing this small act of rebellion for what it was, Emma's first step toward reclaiming her authentic self. I think that's an excellent idea. Shall I call my driver? Actually, Emma said, could we take the Volvo and maybe stop for lunch at that little Vietnamese place we used to go to when I was in college? The one with the amazing pho? Fams? I asked, pleased by this glimpse of the old Emma and her unpretentious tastes. Absolutely. Though I should warn you, they've expanded since you last visited. They have 3 locations now. Good for them, Emma smiled. Their food deserves the success. As we prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from William. Arrived at guest house. Thank you again for this opportunity. No pressure, but please let Emma know I'm here whenever, if ever. She's ready to talk. I showed the message to Emma, who read it with an inscrutable expression. Tell him I need time, she said finally, but that I appreciate his decision to stand up to George. I typed a response conveying her message, then added, we're heading out for a few hours. Security has your contact information if you need anything. Ready? I asked Emma as I grabbed my car keys. Almost, she replied, disappearing upstairs. When she returned a few minutes later, she had changed out of her leggings and Harvard sweatshirt. Instead of the designer clothing she typically wore for public outings as a Thompson wife, she had found an old pair of jeans and a faded Boston University t-shirt that she must have left at my condo years ago. Now I'm ready, she declared with a small but determined smile. As we drove toward downtown Boston in my modest Volvo, I glanced at Emma's profile and saw something I hadn't seen in years. A sense of possibility, of horizon. The road ahead would undoubtedly contain difficult conversations, painful reckonings, and hard decisions about her marriage. But Emma was emerging from the Thompson family's shadow, rediscovering her voice, her preferences, her authentic self. And that, I reflected, was worth more than all the social standing and designer wardrobes in Boston. Our shopping expedition turned into something far more meaningful than a simple retail therapy session. As Emma moved through the stores, I watched her rediscover her own taste, her own aesthetic. She gravitated toward colors and styles that the Thompson family would have dismissed as too casual, too vibrant, or too unconventional. With each purchase, she seemed to reclaim a small piece of herself. "Remember this?" she asked, holding up a mustard yellow cardigan similar to one she'd worn constantly during her college years. "You practically lived in that sweater your sophomore year," I recalled with a smile. "Diane would have a conniption if she saw you in that color." "Diane once told me that yellow was for attention seekers and tourists," Emma laughed, adding the cardigan to her growing collection. "Which is precisely why I'm buying it." By mid-afternoon, we had accumulated several bags of clothing that represented Emma's emerging sense of self. Comfortable, colorful, and completely unlike the curated wardrobe she'd maintained as a Thompson wife. We ended our excursion at Fam's, where the owner recognized Emma immediately despite the 3-year absence. "Miss Emma!" Mr. Pham exclaimed, coming out from behind the counter to greet us. "Where have you been hiding? Your regular table?" "Is open. Extra bean sprouts, less cilantro, yes?" Emma's eyes widened with surprise and pleasure. "You remember my order after all this time?" "Of course! You were our best customer for 4 years. Then poof, you disappear!" He gestured dramatically before leading us to a small table by the window. "Life got complicated," Emma explained vaguely. "Life always complicated," Mr. Pham agreed sagely. "But good foe makes everything better." The simple, authentic meal was a stark contrast to the elaborate cuisine that dominated Thompson family gatherings. Emma ate with obvious enjoyment, soaking in the unpretentious atmosphere and genuine warmth of a place where she was valued for her patronage and personality, not her social connections. "I've missed this," she sighed, setting down her spoon. "Not just the food, but the feeling. Being somewhere that feels real." "The Thompson world has its own reality," I observed. "It's just a carefully constructed one, with very specific rules and values." "Values that don't actually value anything worthwhile," Emma said. "Do you know what Diane once told me? She said accomplishments were irrelevant compared to associations. That it mattered more who you knew than what you did, or who you were." "That explains a lot about their approach to life," I noted. "Including how they treated me." Emma winced. "I'm so sorry, Jenny, for all of it. For how they dismissed you, excluded you, treated you like you were somehow beneath them. And I'm especially sorry that I didn't stand up for you more forcefully." "You were navigating a complex situation," I reassured her. "Trying to build a relationship with your in-laws while maintaining family connections isn't easy under the best circumstances." "Still," Emma insisted, "I should have been stronger. I should have recognized what was happening and put a stop to it." "We can't change the past," I reminded her gently, "but we can learn from it, both of us." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about William." "What about him?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. "I'm trying to separate what's real from what isn't. When he stood up to his father this morning, was that genuine growth or just a tactical retreat now that the Thompson ship is sinking?" "Only time will tell," I said. "But I was there, and I can tell you that his confrontation with George seemed authentic. Standing up to your father is never easy, especially when your entire identity has been built around meeting his expectations." "I know," Emma acknowledged quietly. "That's what makes this so confusing. Part of me wants to believe that William is capable of genuine change, that there's still something worth salvaging in our marriage. Another part wonders if I'm just being naive again, seeing what I want to see instead of what's actually there." "Trust your instincts," I advised, "but verify with evidence. Watch his actions over time, not just his words in moments of crisis." Emma stirred her tea absently. "Do you think people can truly change? Fundamentally, I mean." "I do," I said, after a moment's reflection. "But not easily, and rarely completely. Real change requires acknowledging hard truths about yourself, facing consequences, and making different choices consistently over time. It's possible, but it's never quick or simple." "So I should be skeptical of William's overnight transformation," Emma concluded. "Cautiously optimistic might be a better approach," I suggested. "Recognize the positive steps he's taking without abandoning your critical thinking. And most importantly, focus on your own healing and growth rather than fixing him or your marriage." Emma nodded, seeming to find wisdom in this balanced perspective. "I think I'd like to take some time before I talk to him, a few days at least. I need to get clearer on who I am now before I can evaluate who we might be together." "That sounds wise," I agreed. "And there's no rush. The guest house is comfortable and William isn't going anywhere." As we drove home late that afternoon, Emma seemed more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. She had exchanged her designer sunglasses for a pair we'd picked up at a local boutique and let her hair down from the restrictive styles Diane had deemed appropriate. These small changes reflected a larger internal shift, a woman beginning to remember herself. When we pulled into the driveway of my Chestnut Hill home, I noticed William's car parked near the guest house, which was located across the back garden from the main residence. Emma followed my gaze but made no comment. "I think I'll change and then spend some time in the library," she said as we entered the house. "I saw you have the new Louise Penny novel. I've been wanting to read it for months." "Help yourself to anything in the house," I told her. "I need to review some documents in my study, but I'll join you for dinner around 7 if that works for you." Emma nodded, then hesitated. "Jenny, thank you. Not just for today, but for everything. For creating this safe space for me to figure things out. For not saying, 'I told you so' about the Thompsons. For helping me find myself again." "You never really lost yourself," I reminded her. "You were just temporarily obscured by expectations that weren't your own." After Emma went upstairs with her shopping bags, I headed to my study to review the folder William had provided. As promised, it contained a detailed accounting of how Emma's trust fund had been used over the past 3 years. The transactions were meticulously documented, with explanations for each significant transfer. What emerged was a troubling pattern of escalation. Initially, William had made small withdrawals from their joint accounts, amounts that could be reasonably explained as household expenses or investments for their shared future. But as Thompson Wealth Management's financial situation deteriorated, the withdrawals increased in both frequency and amount. By the past 6 months, substantial sums were being systematically diverted to cover the firm's shortfalls. Most concerning was a series of transfers totaling nearly $800,000 to an account labeled Nantucket Acquisition LLC. Clearly the funds being assembled for the Nantucket property purchase George had announced at Emma's birthday dinner. According to the documentation, William had personally authorized these transfers, though he included a note explaining that he had been told by George that Emma had verbally approved the investment strategy. If true, this suggested that George had been lying to his own son about Emma's involvement, creating a fiction of her consent to facilitate access to her trust fund. If false, it meant William was still attempting to minimize his culpability by shifting blame to his father. I made detailed notes on the documentation, flagging items that required further investigation or verification. I would have my financial team conduct a thorough audit, but my preliminary review suggested that William had indeed provided a comprehensive and apparently honest accounting. Whether that honesty was motivated by genuine remorse or by the recognition that full disclosure was his best legal strategy remained to be seen. Just as I finished my initial review, my cell phone rang. The caller ID displayed a name I hadn't expected to see: Diane Thompson. "Jennifer," she began when I answered, her voice strained but composed. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "What can I do for you, Diane?" I asked, skipping the social niceties that normally characterized our limited interactions. "I'd like to speak with Emma," she said. "I've been trying her cell phone, but she's not answering." "Emma is taking some time to process everything that's happened," I replied. "If she hasn't answered your calls, I have to assume that's intentional." "This is a family matter," Diane insisted, a hint of her usual imperious tone emerging. "Whatever disagreements we may have had, Emma is still my daughter-in-law. I have a right to speak with her." "You have no rights regarding Emma," I corrected calmly. "She's an adult who chooses who she engages with. If she wants to talk to you, she will." Diane was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its commanding edge. "Please," she said quietly. "It's important. Things are complicated right now." The uncharacteristic plea caught me off guard. Diane Thompson did not say please to people she considered her social inferiors. "Is this about William's decision to cooperate with regulators?" I asked, probing for her true motivation. You know about that? She sounded surprised. I was present when he called George to inform him of his decision, I confirmed. Then you know that our family is in a difficult position, Diane said. George is not handling this well. William's betrayal has hit him particularly hard. Betrayal is an interesting word choice for someone choosing to be honest about financial improprieties, I observed. That's a matter of perspective, Diane countered. In any case, I'm not calling to debate ethics with you. I need to speak with my daughter-in-law about practical matters that affect her directly. I'll let Emma know you called, I promised. Whether she chooses to return that call is entirely up to her. Jennifer? Diane's voice took on an unusual note of urgency. There are things happening that you don't understand. Things that could affect Emma's future. Please, just have her call me, for her own sake. The cryptic warning triggered my protective instincts. If you're concerned about Emma's well-being, you can share those concerns with me directly. This isn't about... Diane stopped herself, then tried again with obvious effort at restraint. Fine. If Emma won't speak with me, perhaps you and I could meet privately. Tomorrow morning at the Bristol, 9 o'clock. The Bristol Lounge was an upscale restaurant in the Four Seasons Hotel, neutral territory but decidedly in Diane's social comfort zone. I considered declining, but my curiosity about what could prompt Diane Thompson to request a meeting with me, the stepmother she had consistently marginalized, outweighed my reluctance. I'll be there, I agreed. But I won't be bringing Emma, and I won't be pressuring her to reconcile with the Thompson family until she's ready. Understood, Diane said stiffly. 9 o'clock. After she hung up, I sat contemplating this unexpected development. Diane's call suggested that the repercussions of William's break from the family business were creating significant turbulence within the Thompson household. Her veiled warning about things happening that could affect Emma's future was concerning, though it could easily be nothing more than a manipulative tactic to regain access to Emma. I decided not to mention the call to Emma immediately. She was finally experiencing some peace and emotional space after the intensity of the past 24 hours. If Diane had legitimate concerns that would impact Emma's well-being, I would learn about them tomorrow and share them appropriately. If it was merely another Thompson family manipulation attempt, there was no need to burden Emma with it at all. Dinner that evening was quiet, but comfortable. Emma had changed into some of her new purchases, jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes look brighter than they had in months. We discussed books, films, memories from her college years, deliberately avoiding heavier topics related to the Thompsons or her marriage. It was like reconnecting with a dear friend after a long absence, rediscovering the person beneath layers of accumulated pretense. I think I'll call the Children's Museum tomorrow, Emma announced as we finished dessert. Not about a job specifically, but just to reconnect. Sarah Jenkins was the education director when I interned there. I wonder if she's still around. That sounds like a positive step, I encouraged. Reconnecting with your professional interests is an important part of reclaiming your sense of self. It feels self-indulgent somehow, Emma admitted. With everything happening with William and his family, focusing on career possibilities seems, I don't know, frivolous? It's not frivolous to invest in your own identity and purpose. I disagreed. In fact, it's essential. Your worth isn't defined by your relationship to the Thompson family crisis. You're allowed to move forward with your own life, regardless of what's happening with them. Emma nodded slowly. You're right. It's just strange after 3 years of orienting my entire existence around Thompson family priorities to suddenly focus on what I want. What do you want, Emma? I asked gently. Beyond the immediate situation with William, what do you want for your life? She considered the question thoughtfully. I want work that matters. I want to use my education psychology degree for something meaningful, not just as a credential to mention at charity luncheons. I want authentic friendships based on genuine connection, not social positioning. She paused. And eventually, I want a family of my own, children, but in a home with values I actually believe in. Those are beautiful aspirations, I told her, and entirely achievable. With or without William, Emma added softly, voicing the question that clearly weighed on her mind. That's a decision only you can make, I reminded her, and not one you need to rush. After dinner, Emma retired to her room, mentioning that she wanted to journal, another practice she had abandoned during her marriage. I used the quiet evening hours to prepare for my meeting with Diane, reviewing my notes on Thompson Wealth Management's financial situation and considering possible scenarios that might prompt Diane's unusual outreach. The next morning dawned, clear and cold, a perfect December day in Boston. Emma was still asleep when I left for my meeting with Diane, leaving her a note explaining my absence and encouraging her to explore whatever interested her that day. The Bristol Lounge was elegantly appointed, but nearly empty at this early hour. Diane Thompson was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, her posture rigid, her appearance immaculate as always, though I noted with interest that she wore minimal jewelry, unusual for a woman who typically adorned herself with visual symbols of wealth and status. "Thank you for coming, Jennifer," she greeted me, gesturing to the chair opposite her. I noted her use of my full name rather than the diminutive Jenny she typically employed when she wanted to subtly emphasize the social distance between us. "You made it sound urgent," I replied, taking the offered seat. "I'm curious what could be so important that you'd arrange a private meeting with me after years of barely acknowledging my existence." Diane flinched slightly at the directness, but didn't refute the characterization. "Circumstances change," she said simply. "Priorities shift." "Indeed they do," I agreed. "Though I find it interesting that your priorities shifted precisely when you discovered my actual financial standing." The server approached before Diane could respond, and we both ordered coffee. Once we were alone again, Diane leaned forward, her voice lowered despite the empty restaurant. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this table," she began, uncharacteristic, urgency in her tone. "George doesn't know I'm meeting with you. If he did." She trailed off, leaving the potential consequences unspoken. "I'm listening," I said neutrally. Diane took a steadying breath. "Thompson Wealth Management isn't just experiencing financial difficulties, it's completely insolvent. Has been for over a year. The only thing keeping it afloat has been a series of increasingly desperate financial maneuvers, using new client, investments to cover obligations to existing clients, leveraging personal assets that don't actually exist, and most recently, diverting funds from Emma's trust." This wasn't entirely new information, but Diane's frank acknowledgement of the situation was unexpected. "I'm aware of the general outline," I told her. "William provided documentation regarding Emma's trust fund usage. What William doesn't know, what even Michael doesn't know, is that George has taken more extreme measures recently," Diane continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been selling family assets and transferring the proceeds offshore, converting liquid investments to physical assets that can't be easily traced or seized, preparing for what he calls the contingency scenario. He's planning to flee," I translated, immediately grasping the implications. Diane nodded, her perfectly maintained facade cracking slightly. "Within the week, possibly sooner, now that William has decided to cooperate with regulators. George has a property in the Cayman Islands, purchased through a shell corporation years ago, untraceable back to the Thompson family." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, studying her carefully for signs of deception or manipulation. "Because Emma's name is on documents," Diane revealed, lowering her voice further. "Financial authorizations, power of attorney forms, corporate filings for several of the shell companies. George had William obtain her signatures over the past year, sometimes on documents she believed were related to their personal finances or charitable contributions. I felt a cold anger building at this new level of deception. He forged her signature? Not exactly, Diane clarified. He had her sign the actual documents, but with false explanations of what they were. The result is the same: Emma's legal exposure if this all comes crashing down, which it will. Why would George implicate his own daughter-in-law? I demanded, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Because Emma has her own assets separate from Thompson Wealth Management, Diane explained. Assets that could potentially be seized if she were deemed complicit in financial improprieties. George sees her trust fund as insurance, a resource that might remain accessible even if everything else is frozen or confiscated. The calculated ruthlessness of this strategy was breathtaking. George Thompson had deliberately positioned his son's wife as a potential fall person, creating a paper trail that could implicate her while simultaneously planning to access her protected assets during his escape. "Does William know about this?" I asked. "No," Diane shook her head. This was George's private contingency plan. William knew about the firm's problems, of course, and participated in some of the questionable transactions, but he doesn't know about the offshore preparations or Emma's uninformed involvement. I considered this information, assessing both its plausibility and Diane's possible motives for sharing it. Why now, Diane? Why come to me with this when you've spent years treating me as an irrelevant outsider to be tolerated at best? Diane's perfectly manicured hands tightened around her coffee cup. "Because I'm not going," she said quietly. "To the Cayman Islands. I'm not fleeing with George." This was genuinely surprising. Diane Thompson had built her entire identity around her role as George's wife and social partner. "You're leaving him?" "After 34 years, she confirmed, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. "I've overlooked a great deal during our marriage. His affairs, his ethical flexibility in business, his emotional unavailability. But this, deliberately implicating Emma to protect himself, this is unforgivable." Her words seemed sincere, but I remained cautious. Diane was, after all, a consummate performer in social situations. "And what do you want from me in exchange for this information?" "Protection for Emma," Diane stated simply. "Help ensuring that she doesn't become collateral damage in George's desperate exit strategy. And," she hesitated, seeming almost embarrassed by what she was about to ask, "some guidance on how to navigate the legal and financial aftermath of separating from George after all these years. I have no resources of my own. Everything is in his name or tied to Thompson Wealth Management." I sat back, studying the woman across from me. Diane Thompson, the social arbiter who had deemed me unworthy of full inclusion in family events. The woman who had systematically reshaped Emma to fit Thompson standards. The polished society wife who had built her identity on appearances and connections, was essentially asking for my help to start over at 62. "You understand why I might be skeptical," I said finally. "After years of condescension and exclusion, you're suddenly reaching out as if we're allies." "I'm not asking to be your friend," Diane clarified, a flash of her old directness emerging. "I'm asking you to help Emma, which I know is your priority. And yes, I'm asking for some practical assistance for myself, because you're the only person in our extended circle with both the financial expertise and the personal integrity to provide it." The unexpected compliment caught me off guard. Diane. Thompson acknowledging my personal integrity was something I never thought I'd hear. "I'll help Emma regardless," I told her. "That's never been in question. As for you..." I considered the request. Part of me wanted to refuse out of justified resentment for years of subtle humiliation. But I also recognized the courage it must have taken for Diane to approach me, and the genuine concern for Emma that appeared to motivate her. "I'll connect you with my attorney," I decided. "She specializes in complex marital property cases and has experience with situations involving financial impropriety, She can advise you on how to protect yourself legally when you separate from George." Relief washed over Diane's face. "Thank you," she said simply. "Don't thank me yet," I cautioned. "First, we need to address the documents Emma allegedly signed. I'll need copies of everything, the actual papers, not just descriptions. And I'll need to know exactly when and where these signatures were obtained, what Emma was told about what she was signing." "I've already compiled as much as I could." "Access," Diane said, reaching into her designer handbag and extracting a USB drive. "It's all here, the documents, dates, circumstances as I understand them. I've been gathering information for weeks, ever since I discovered what George was planning." I took the drive, impressed despite myself at Diane's foresight. "This was thorough of you." "I've spent 3 decades as the perfect corporate wife," Diane said with a hint of bitterness. "Organizing, documenting, maintaining appearances. These are skills I've mastered. It's about time I used them for something worthwhile." "And what about William?" I asked. "Where does he fit into all this?" Diane sighed. "William is complicated. He's not George. He has a conscience, a capacity for genuine emotion that his father lacks. But he's also a product of his upbringing. George has shaped him since childhood to prioritize family reputation and financial success above personal integrity." She paused. "His decision to break from the firm surprised me. It suggests he may have more moral courage than I've given him credit for. Or more pragmatic self-preservation," I suggested. "Perhaps both," Diane acknowledged. "In any case, he loves Emma, in his way. Whether that's enough to rebuild their marriage after all this deception is something only Emma can decide." Our coffee had grown cold during this intense conversation. The server approached to offer refills, but we both declined, the moment for social niceties having passed. "What are your plans now?" I asked Diane. "Practically speaking, I've secured an apartment in Cambridge," she revealed. "Modest by our usual standards, but comfortable enough. I've been quietly moving personal items there for weeks, family photographs, jewelry, things that matter to me. I plan to leave the Brookline house tomorrow while George is at the office." "He might come looking for you," I pointed out, "especially if he discovers you've taken documentation related to his financial maneuvers." "He won't find me," Diane said with unexpected firmness. "And by the time he realizes what I've taken, it will be too late. The information will already be in the hands of people who can use it appropriately." I was seeing a new side of Diane Thompson, a strategic thinker who had operated in the shadow of her husband's more visible authority. I wondered how much of the Thompson family's social success over the years had actually been orchestrated by Diane rather than George. "I should get back to Emma," I said, standing to signal the end of our meeting. "She doesn't know about this conversation, and I need to decide how much to share with her." "Tell her everything," Diane advised, surprising me again. "Emma is stronger than any of us have given her credit for. She deserves to know the full truth about what she's been unwittingly involved in." I nodded, recognizing the wisdom in this approach. "I'll have my attorney contact you this afternoon. In the meantime, be careful. George won't react well when he realizes you're leaving." "I've spent 34 years managing George's reactions," Diane said with a grim smile. "I can handle one more day." As we parted ways outside the restaurant, Diane hesitated, then said quietly, "I was wrong about you, Jennifer. For years, I dismissed you as inconsequential because you didn't fit into our social paradigm. I never bothered to look beyond the surface. That was my mistake, one of many." "We all make mistakes, Diane," I replied. "What matters is how we address them once we recognize them." "Indeed," she agreed. "I hope I'm addressing mine before it's too late." As I drove back to Chestnut Hill, my mind was processing this unexpected alliance with Diane Thompson and the troubling information she had shared. The situation had become more complex than I had initially realized, with Emma potentially facing legal exposure for documents she had signed without understanding their true purpose. I needed to speak with my attorney immediately, arrange for a forensic accountant to review the materials Diane had provided, and most importantly, have an honest conversation with Emma about these new developments. The road ahead would likely include difficult legal challenges, potential financial complications, and emotional reckonings for everyone involved. But as I pulled into my driveway, I felt a surprising sense of optimism despite these challenges. Emma was reclaiming her authentic self. William was showing signs of moral growth independent of his family's toxic influence. Even Diane was demonstrating an unexpected capacity for ethical clarity and courage. The Thompsons had spent generations building a facade of wealth, prestige, and social superiority, a facade that had been maintained through manipulation, deception, and emotional control. Now that facade was crumbling, revealing both the corruption at its foundation and the human complexity of those who had lived behind it. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally emerging. And in my experience, truth, however painful initially, was always the necessary first step toward genuine healing and transformation. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.